Hey, what is going on, guys? I have not talked much about who exactly I like for president, but I just got to say we need to start talking about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. because I'm not going to lie to you. I've been warming up to him a lot lately. Like, I actually kind of like him. I'm not saying I'm going to vote for him. I have no idea who I'm going to vote for yet. It's still too early. As of right now, I'm undecided, but I am really warming up to this guy. One of the interesting things that I really like is how some of the things that he said during the pandemic when he actually got banned turned out to be right. And I just want to say, I'm just now realizing I'm not the only person who likes Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He's polling at 19. He's polling between 19 to 20%, which is actually really good because if you look at it, obviously Joe Biden is Joe Biden, but there's only one other notable person in the race, and that's Marianne Williamson. She's only polling at, you can see it right here, she's only polling at 9%. So Marianne Williamson is polling at 9%. Obviously, Biden is Biden. The Democratic Party is going to do everything they can to rig it for Joe Biden to win. No doubt about it. And then you've got Robert F. Kennedy, who is polling at 19%, which is actually really, really good. But let me go ahead and show you guys why I wanted to talk about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It's because of this post right here. So Robert F. Kennedy quote tweeted this post right here where he says, "The awakening continues. It's dawning on establishment figures like Mark Zuckerberg. They were complicit in a web of deception during COVID." This is true. And regardless of how a lot of people feel, I'll say this, regardless of how the Democratic establishment feels, regardless of how the mainstream media feels, which the Democratic establishment and the mainstream media go hand in hand. They are two sides of the same coin. They work together. They know each other, blah, 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 blah. Regardless of how they feel, I think one of the main reasons why RFK is resonating with so many people is because you still have a lot of people who, one, look for truth and don't really care about partisanship. They just want to hear the freaking truth. And two, you have a lot of people who are still really bitter about how they were treated during COVID. What happened during COVID? Well, there was a lot of lies. There was a lot of deception. And there was a lot of the mainstream media and these big tech companies, these big social media platforms, just downright blocking people who had things to say that were against the mainstream narrative. Like, if you spoke out, I remember very, very well during the pandemic because I remember seeing some of these things. You had a couple of activists, you had a few doctors, you had Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was one of the main people who spoke out against the vaccine and said that it's not really all that effective. That's ineffective. And what happened? You get shadow banned, you get banned, you get blocked, you get censored, all this crazy stuff. And now fast forward to now, what do we have? Well, first off, a lot of the stuff that was said was true. I just want to make that very clear because one of the main things that was said during the pandemic was, oh, COVID didn't come out of a laboratory. It came from a bat. Anybody who says that it came out of a laboratory, you're just a conspiracy theorist. You don't know what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah. Fast forward to now, not only have you had the government itself literally come out and say, yeah, it pretty much came out of a lab. You literally had the FBI, I believe. It was either the FBI or the CIA, I forgot. But one of the United States intelligence agencies came out and basically showed really good evidence that it very likely came out of a lab. And now at this point, out of all of the evidence that I've seen and all of the things that have come out, I'm more convinced than ever now that it came out of a lab than I was before. Like, I'm even more convinced now. But back then when you would say that, you would get blocked, you would get censored, all that crazy stuff. And now fast forward, what do we have here? Well, Mark Zuckerberg went on the Lex Fridman podcast, and this is what he had to say about the vaccine and censorship and all that. Let's just go ahead and take a listen. Here we go.
So misinformation, I think, has been a really tricky one because there are things that are kind of obviously false, right? That are maybe factual. But may not be harmful. So it's like, all right, are you going to censor someone for just being wrong? It's, if there's no kind of harm implication of what they're doing, I think there's a bunch of real kind of issues and challenges there. But then I think that there are other places where it is, just take some of the stuff around COVID earlier on in the pandemic where there were, real health implications, but there hadn't been time to fully vet a bunch of the scientific assumptions. And, unfortunately, I think a lot of the kind of establishment on that, kind of waffled on a bunch of facts and, asked for a bunch of things to be censored that in retrospect ended up being, more debatable or true. And that stuff is really tough, right? And really undermines trust in that. And,
So yeah, the government
So
lost a lot of
misinformation, I
trust. I'm
think,
sorry.
is
So yeah, the government lost a lot of trust during the pandemic. You could clearly see in the tweet right here. It says Mark Zuckerberg says it was challenging to censor COVID misinformation because the scientific establishment was frequently wrong, which ultimately undermined public trust. That is literally exactly what happened, and you have a lot of people who are still bitter about it. Now, let me go ahead and play this mainstream media stuff and just kind of laugh at how they act. So this is how the mainstream media feels about RFK. Okay, let's just go ahead and play it so you guys can see how ridiculously rigged it is and how CNN behaves. Here we go.
For sitting presidents, and that's clearly what the DNC is going to try to do this time.
I just want to push back on one thing. I agree with you entirely about how his anti-vax stuff is outrageous and gross, but when you phrase it as putting that aside, you can see his appeal. He was also an election denier in 2004.
2004, absolutely.
He completely lied about all that kind of stuff. He has these conspiracy theories about how Sirhan didn't kill his father. He's a complete nutter, and were it not for his name and his family wealth, he would be much better placed as the angry owner of a used bookstore in Haight-Ashbury. He is a total crank, and I think that this is all basically significant because of name ID and because of general discontent among voters who want Democratic voters who want an alternative to Joe Biden. The problem is, you guys are absolutely right. Not the people who want the alternative to Joe Biden that really like RFK aren't like likely primary voters.
Right.
And so I think this is going to.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true. I vote in every single primary, and I like RFK. So yeah, this is the problem. The mainstream media likes to beat up on people that are not Biden. That's literally what you're seeing here. This guy's just absolutely hammering RFK and making it seem like he's just crazy. He's some, whatever he said, critter, jitter. I don't know what he said, but just calling him all these crazy names and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, dude, no matter what you say, you cannot deny that there's a lot of truth to what RFK says. And you also cannot deny that a lot of Americans want something different. And I think that's what the mainstream media misses. A lot of Americans want something different. Now, obviously, Trump's quote member base want him, fine. But I can only speak for the Democrats. In terms of Democrats, there are a lot of Democrats out there that want somebody else. And RFK, in my opinion, is filling that void of another reasonable Democrat who speaks to a lot of how a lot of Americans feel that the mainstream media won't cover. The mainstream media will not tell the truth about the vaccine. There's very few places on the internet you could go to actually hear real truth about the vaccine, real truth about the border, real truth about foreign policy. You're just going to get all this biased, influential bull crap that the powers that be want to just jam down your throat and want you to believe. Like, I really can't stand the fact that whenever you have an opposing opinion about the vaccine or about COVID, they just say you're a vax denier, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're crazy, you're a nut job, you don't know what you're talking about, you're factually incorrect and blah, blah, blah. But we literally just watched the Mark Zuckerberg interview where he literally said that there were a lot of people in the science community who got things wrong, which is true. The government got a lot of things wrong, okay? They weren't 100%. Matter of fact, they weren't even 80% right when it came to science and the vaccines and the pandemic. And as a matter of fact, the government actually did not do that good of a job, in my personal opinion. And I think that's led to a lot of frustration. And not only that, when people speak out about it and you censor them and then you try to paint them as crazy or ridiculous when a huge amount of the population feels this way, well, now you've got yourself a huge problem. And so that's just kind of where we're at with it. So anyway, guys, those are my thoughts on the entire thing. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.